When we talk about state property and real estate laws, we're essentially looking at the legal framework that governs ownership, use, and transfer of property within a specific state. These laws determine how property rights are established and protected, how transactions should be conducted, and what restrictions or obligations property owners might have. Understanding these regulations is crucial whether you're buying a home, investing in real estate, or managing property, because each state can have its own unique rules that impact everything from zoning and land use to property taxes and landlord-tenant relationships. Keeping these laws in mind helps to ensure that all property dealings are legitimate, transparent, and enforceable. Property law is essentially the legal framework that governs how property is acquired, owned, transferred, and used. It covers both real property, which refers to land and buildings, and personal property, such as movable items. This area of law clearly defines who has the right to hold property, the ways those rights can be created or transferred between parties, and under what circumstances the state can impose restrictions or limitations on those rights. A key part of this framework is state property and real estate laws, which help regulate these activities to ensure clarity and fairness in property dealings. Understanding these fundamentals is crucial for navigating any property-related issues effectively. Now, let's talk about the different types of property. First, we have real property. This includes the land itself and everything that's permanently attached to it. So, that means buildings, structures, and any permanent improvements on the land are all considered real property. Even fixtures, which are items that become a permanent part of the property, fall under this category. On the other hand, we have personal property. These are movable assets that are not permanently attached to the land. Examples include chattels like furniture, vehicles, and equipment. Personal property is usually transferred separately from the land when a sale or transaction takes place. Understanding these distinctions is important because different rules and laws apply to real property and personal property, especially when dealing with state property and real estate laws. This helps in clarifying ownership, transfer, and legal responsibilities associated with each type. When we talk about real property ownership, there are a few key types to understand. First is fee simple ownership, which is the most complete form of property ownership you can have. It gives the owner full rights to possess, use, and control the property, although this is still subject to things like taxes, zoning laws, and other government regulations. Next, there's leasehold ownership. Here, the tenant gets the right to occupy and use the property for a specific period of time, but the actual ownership remains with the landlord. So essentially, the tenant has a temporary interest, but they don't own the property outright. Then, we have easements, which are a bit different. An easement grants someone a limited, non-possessory right to use someone else's land. This could be for access, utilities, or drainage purposes, for example. The key here is that the easement allows specific use without transferring ownership or possession. All of these forms of ownership and rights are governed by state property and real estate laws, which can vary but set the framework for how these interests are created and protected. Understanding these basic types helps clarify the complex nature of property rights. When we look at deed requirements and types, the key factor is the level of legal protection the deed offers, based on what the grantor promises about the title. First, the warranty deed provides the strongest protection for the buyer. It includes broad guarantees that the title is clear, meaning no one else has claims against the property. Next, we have the quitclaim deed, which is quite different. It simply transfers whatever interest the grantor has. But it offers no promises about ownership or potential defects in the title. Finally, the special warranty deed sits in the middle. It covers title issues that arise only during the grantor's period of ownership, but it doesn't protect against problems caused by previous owners. Of course, all these deeds must align with state property and real estate laws, which can vary and impact how these protections work in practice. Here, we're looking at the three main types of recording acts that help protect property rights and clarify who holds valid title in cases where multiple parties claim ownership. First, the Notice Act focuses on protecting a good faith purchaser who buys property without knowledge of prior claims. Under this act, even if they're not the first to record, they can still win if they had no notice of earlier interests. While recording first helps, it's not strictly necessary. Next, the Race Act takes a different approach. It rewards the party who records their interest first, regardless of whether the later buyer had notice or not. So filing quickly is the key here, as the first to record effectively wins, and notice generally doesn't come into play. Finally, the Race Notice Act combines elements of both. Under this act, a later buyer must both be without notice of earlier claims and record their interest first to prevail. So, timing and good faith are both crucial. All these recording acts serve to protect purchasers and establish clear property rights under state real estate laws, helping to prevent disputes and ensure orderly transactions. Let's talk about easements and restrictive covenants, which are important concepts in property and real estate law. An easement grants someone a limited legal right to use another person's land for specific purposes. For example, this might involve accessing a property through a shared driveway, running utilities across a neighbor's land, or walking along a certain path. It doesn't give ownership, but a right to use the land in a defined way. On the other hand, a restrictive covenant sets limits on how land can be used. These restrictions usually aim to maintain the character and appearance of a neighborhood. They might control things like building renovations, the colors you can paint your home, or the types of activities allowed on the property. Both easements and restrictive covenants are vital as they shape how land can be utilized and help protect property values and community standards. Understanding these can help prevent disputes and ensure everyone's rights are respected. When we look at the landlord-tenant relationship, it's important to understand the key duties each party holds. Starting with the landlord, their primary responsibility is to provide a habitable unit that complies with all relevant building codes. This means the property must be safe and livable from the start. Next, landlords are required to make timely repairs and maintain common areas, ensuring that everything remains functional and accessible for tenants. Additionally, landlords must respect the rules around notice periods, privacy, and handling security deposits correctly, which helps protect tenant rights and fosters trust. On the tenant side, the main duties begin with paying rent on time according to the lease agreement, which is fundamental for maintaining the tenancy. Tenants also need to keep the property reasonably clean and avoid causing damage beyond normal wear and tear. Finally, tenants should follow all lease rules and promptly report any major issues or repairs needed, so the landlord can address them quickly. Understanding these duties is crucial because state property and real estate laws govern how these responsibilities are enforced, ensuring a fair and balanced relationship for both parties. Now let's take a closer look at the key components of lease agreements and terms. First, the duration of the lease sets how long the tenant will stay, and clarifies if the lease automatically renews or ends on a specific date. This helps both parties understand the commitment period right from the start. Next, the rent amount section specifies how much rent is due, when it must be paid, and any grace periods allowed. It also outlines the rules about late fees, which is crucial for maintaining clear expectations around payments. Maintenance responsibilities are also clearly defined, indicating who is responsible for repairs, utilities, and general upkeep. This ensures the property remains in good condition and that both tenant and landlord know their obligations. The termination clause is especially important. It details the notice that must be given to end the lease, any rights to exit early, and what happens if the lease is broken. This protects both parties in case circumstances change. Finally, the security deposit section covers the amount required, what deductions can be legally made from it, and how soon the deposit must be returned after the lease ends. Understanding these terms is essential for avoiding disputes. All of these components must align with state property and real estate laws, which govern the legality and enforceability of these terms to protect everyone involved. Let's walk through the eviction process and the rights involved. First, the landlord must provide a written notice to the tenant. This notice either points out a lease violation or sets a move-out deadline, and it must comply with state law requirements. If the tenant doesn't fix the issue or leave by the deadline, the landlord can then file for eviction in court and formally serve the tenant with these papers. Next comes the court hearing. where both the landlord and tenant can present evidence. Tenants have the opportunity to raise defenses, such as issues with the notice, payment disputes, or problems with the property conditions. Finally, enforcement of an eviction can only happen through a court order. It's important to know that landlords cannot take matters into their own hands with self-help evictions like lockouts or shutting off utilities. Those actions are illegal. This process ensures that both parties are protected under state property and real estate laws. Adverse possession allows a trespasser to gain legal title to land by possessing it for a certain period, as defined by state law. For this to happen, the possession must meet 5 key criteria. First, it has to be open, meaning the use isn't hidden and is visible to others. Second, it must be notorious, so the use is obvious enough to alert the true owner that someone is claiming the land. Third, the possession must be exclusive, meaning the land is controlled by the claimant alone, not shared with the public or the owner. Fourth, the use needs to be hostile, which means it occurs without the owner's permission. And finally, the possession must be continuous, maintained consistently for the entire statutory period required by the state. Meeting all these conditions can ultimately result in legal ownership through adverse possession. Let's walk through the key stages of property transfer and conveyancing. It starts with the offer, where the buyer proposes a price and outlines the core terms they want. Next comes acceptance, which happens when the seller agrees to those terms, creating mutual assent. This is the point where both parties are on the same page. After acceptance, we move to the contract phase. Here, a written agreement is drafted that clearly sets out the duties each party has and any contingencies that must be met. This document is crucial because it guides the entire transaction. Following that, a title search is conducted. This involves reviewing public records to ensure there are no liens, claims, or defects that could affect the property's title. It's an essential step to protect both buyer and seller. Finally, we reach closing. This is when the deed, funds, and all final documents are exchanged, officially transferring ownership. The entire process of conveyancing essentially turns the agreement into a legal transfer of property, all governed by state property and real estate laws. Understanding these steps helps ensure a smooth and secure transaction. When we look at the relationship between title searches and title insurance, it's important to understand how they work together to manage risk. The title search is the first step. It helps identify any potential risks or defects in the property's title before closing. Issues like liens, ownership disputes, or errors are uncovered during this phase. These defects can then be resolved, cleared up, or specifically excluded from the insurance coverage. After closing, title insurance plays a critical role by protecting the buyer or lender. If a covered defect emerges later on, the policy steps in to help cover financial losses or provide legal defense. This way, title insurance shifts the financial exposure from the buyer or lender to the insurer. Coverage typically protects against problems like undiscovered liens, recording errors, forged deeds, or competing claims of ownership. Most mortgage lenders require their borrowers to purchase a lender's title insurance policy, and buyers often choose to buy an owner's policy for additional protection. The title search itself is a thorough process, where examiners carefully review a variety of documents, deeds, mortgages, tax records, judgments, and court filings to confirm the title is clean and marketable. Finally, it's important to note that title search standards, filing systems, and insurance practices can vary significantly from state to state, influenced by differing property and real estate laws. This means the specific procedures and protections depend on the location of the property. When we talk about home ownership, it's important to understand both the rights and responsibilities that come with it. On the right side, as an owner, you have the freedom to occupy your property. That means living in it and making it your home. You also have the right to exclude others, which means you control who can access your land. Additionally, you can transfer ownership through selling, gifting, or passing it on through your will. Lastly, you have the right to use and improve your property, but this must be done within the bounds of applicable laws and restrictions. Now, with those rights come responsibilities. As a homeowner, you need to pay property taxes and any assessments that apply, which help fund local services. Maintaining safe conditions is crucial, ensuring the property doesn't pose hazards to yourself or others. It's also important to follow zoning laws and any homeowners association rules that are in place, keeping your property in compliance. And if you have a mortgage, honoring those obligations is essential to protect your investment. All these rights and responsibilities are defined and regulated by state property and real estate laws, which provide the legal framework for ownership. Understanding this balance helps protect your home and ensures you're a responsible owner in your community. Now, let's talk about zoning and land use regulations, which are fundamental to how we organize and develop land in our communities. First, residential zoning focuses on housing density, setbacks, and lot use. This means it controls how many homes can be built in an area, how far they must be set back from streets or other properties, and what types of housing are allowed. Next, commercial zoning covers areas for retail stores, offices, and other customer-oriented activities. This zoning ensures that businesses operate in suitable locations that can support customer access and business needs. Industrial zoning is another category, which deals with manufacturing, storage, and the potential operational impacts on surrounding areas, like noise or traffic. Mixed-use zoning is especially interesting because it integrates residential and commercial developments. This approach supports vibrant communities where people can live, work, and shop within the same neighborhood. We also have special districts, which include historic areas, environmentally sensitive zones, or overlay controls that impose additional regulations to protect those unique characteristics. Overall, zoning separates uses not only by what kind of activity occurs, but also by its intensity and potential impact on the surrounding environment and community. Finally, all these zoning regulations operate within the framework of state property and real estate laws, which provide the legal basis for land use control. Understanding these layers is crucial for effective planning and development. Eminent domain refers to the government's power to compel the sale of private property for public use. This can include projects like building roads, schools, utilities, and other infrastructure that benefits the community. However, this power is not unlimited. The taking must serve a legitimate public purpose, as defined by both state and federal laws. It's not enough for the government to take property arbitrarily. There needs to be a clear public benefit. Additionally, property owners are entitled to just compensation when their property is taken. Usually, this compensation is based on the fair market value of the property, ensuring owners are fairly reimbursed for their loss. Understanding these three key concepts, government power, public use, and just compensation, is essential when navigating state property and real estate laws. Let's talk about what homeowners associations, or HOAs, actually control. First, they manage architectural changes and the exterior appearance of homes. This means if you want to make changes like adding a fence, changing your roof, or painting your house a new color, you'll often need approval from the HOA to ensure it fits community standards. Next, the HOA is responsible for maintaining common areas and setting rules for amenities, like pools or parks, which helps keep shared spaces nice and enjoyable for everyone. They also oversee assessments and fees, which fund these maintenance activities, and establish community standards to maintain property values and a cohesive neighborhood look. Central to all of this are the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC&Rs. These are legally recorded rules that bind all property owners and dictate how the property can be used within the community. For example, CC&Rs might include rental caps that limit how many homes can be rented out, or pet restrictions to maintain a peaceful environment. As for owners, it's important to pay dues and any special assessments on time to avoid fines or liens. Owners must also follow all the governing documents to stay in good standing with the HOA. Finally, the HOA governance and CC&Rs operate within the framework of state property and real estate laws, ensuring everything is legally compliant. All these elements work together to maintain the quality and harmony of the community. Here, we're looking at the different legal frameworks that govern water rights. First, there's riparian law, which is common in many states and allows landowners whose property borders a water source to make reasonable use of that water, as long as they don't harm others downstream. This system emphasizes shared use and fairness among neighbors. On the other hand, we have the prior appropriation doctrine, which is more typical in Western states. This approach awards water rights to the first person who lawfully diverts and puts the water to beneficial use. It prioritizes actual use over proximity to the water source. Lastly, some states use hybrid systems, blending elements from both doctrines. These laws balance shoreline ownership rights with permit-based rules for water allocation, trying to address the needs of diverse communities and water users. All of these systems are shaped by state property and real estate laws, reflecting how crucial water is as a resource and property interest. Understanding these distinctions is key to navigating water rights issues effectively. When dealing with environmental compliance and contamination, one of the key concepts to understand is CERCLA liability. This law holds owners, operators, arrangers, and transporters strictly liable for cleanup costs. Importantly, this responsibility can attach even if they didn't actually cause the contamination. That's why Phase 1 environmental assessments are so critical. They involve reviewing records, site history, and visible conditions to identify any recognized environmental concerns. Conducting a thorough Phase 1 helps support due diligence and clarifies risk allocation well before any purchase is finalized. When it comes to brownfield cleanup and redevelopment, the process often hinges on state cleanup programs and remediation standards. Even after the site is reused, there may be institutional controls and ongoing monitoring requirements in place. It's essential to remember that liability follows the land, so understanding and meeting cleanup standards before closing any real estate deal is vital to protect all parties involved. These state property and real estate laws play a significant role in the overall strategy for managing environmental risks in property transactions. Let's talk about mortgages and securitization. First, a mortgage is essentially a secured loan tied to real property. When someone takes out a mortgage, they sign a promissory note, which is a formal promise to repay the loan according to terms set out in the agreement. Next, we have the mortgage document itself. This gives the lender a security interest in the property, meaning if the borrower doesn't repay the loan, the lender has a legal claim to the property. Finally, this secured interest isn't just held by the original lender. It can be assigned, bundled with other loans, or sold in the secondary mortgage markets. This process is governed by state property and real estate laws, which ensure everything is handled legally and properly. Understanding these steps is key to grasping how mortgages function and how they are traded in the broader financial system. When a borrower defaults on their mortgage by missing payments, it sets off a specific sequence of events defined by state property and real estate laws. First, there's the notice of default, which is a formal record by the lender stating the borrower is delinquent. If the borrower doesn't bring the loan current, a notice of sale is scheduled publicly, setting the date for the property to be sold. Next comes the auction, where the property is sold to the highest qualified bidder. If the property doesn't sell at auction, it becomes real estate owned, or REO, meaning ownership reverts back to the lender. This progression is designed to protect both parties while following a clear legal process. Now let's look at some state-specific variations in property and real estate laws. Starting with California, it follows community property rules for marital assets, meaning property acquired during marriage is generally considered jointly owned. Also, spousal consent is often necessary for transferring property, adding an extra layer of protection in transactions. Moving to Texas, it has a strong homestead exemption that protects a primary residence from many creditors. This protection can also extend to larger rural acreage, which is unique compared to other states. Additionally, Texas homestead law limits forced sales in many cases, helping families keep their homes. Florida's homestead laws are notable as well. Here, Save Our Homes caps increases in taxable value, providing homeowners with significant tax relief over time. This helps keep property taxes more predictable and affordable. Lastly, New York has extensive rent regulation affecting many multifamily units. This includes strong tenant protections and renewal rights, which help maintain housing stability and affordability in the state. Overall, these examples highlight how state property and real estate laws can significantly differ, shaping how property is owned, protected, taxed, and rented. Understanding these variations is crucial for any real estate decisions or investments. When we look at common disputes and litigation in property and real estate, most cases really come down to who has the stronger record, clearer rights, or a better compliance history. Let me walk you through the main types of conflicts we often see. First, property boundary disputes. These usually involve issues like encroachments, disagreements over fence lines, or conflicting surveys. The courts can provide remedies such as quiet title actions to clarify ownership, ejectment to remove unauthorized occupants, or official boundary determinations. Next, title disputes. These often revolve around forged deeds, the priority of liens, or competing claims to ownership. The parties involved typically seek declaratory relief to resolve ownership questions, corrections to the title records, or sometimes monetary damages. Then there are landlord-tenant conflicts. Common problems here include unpaid rent, concerns over habitability, disputes over security deposits, or breaches of lease terms. Remedies might involve eviction proceedings, rent abatement, or recovering money owed. Lastly, disputes involving homeowners associations, or HOAs. These frequently concern assessments, enforcement of community rules, architectural controls, or inconsistent enforcement by the HOA. The relief sought can include injunctions to stop rule violations, fines, or shifting of legal fees. Understanding these common dispute categories and the typical remedies available is essential for navigating property and real estate law effectively. Let's review the key takeaways from our discussion on state property and real estate laws. First, having a clear title and ownership is absolutely foundational. It's the starting point for any real estate transaction. Next, contracts must be clear and properly recorded to ensure all parties understand their rights and obligations. We also talked about how landlord-tenant law works to balance the interests of both landlords and tenants, providing protections for each side. Zoning and regulations play a crucial role as well, shaping how land can be used and developed. Importantly, state laws vary significantly, so understanding the specific rules in your area is critical. Finally, given the complexities involved, seeking professional guidance is essential to navigate these laws effectively and avoid potential pitfalls. These points are central to managing property and real estate matters responsibly and successfully. As a best practice, always verify local laws before you sign, file, or close any real estate transaction. This helps ensure you're fully compliant and protected throughout the process. To support this, there are several valuable resources and next steps you can take. State bar associations provide attorney directories, ethics guidance, and referral services, making it easier to find expert legal advice. County recorder offices are essential for accessing deeds, liens, plats, and understanding local filing requirements. Real estate legal resources offer statutes, forms, treatises, and updates that are specific to your state, giving you the most relevant information. Don't hesitate to reach out to professional advisors, such as lawyers, brokers, title officers, surveyors, and certified public accountants. Lastly, make sure you're familiar with state property and real estate laws, as these directly affect every transaction. Following these steps will guide you confidently and help minimize risks.